being here. I hope you're not feeling sleepy after that lunch. But we'll try to keep our conversation alive, considering we have Vikas Swarup, who's written fantastic social thrillers. And such an honor to speak to you.
Honor is mine, Neha. I mean, to be speaking to one of India's most fearless journalists,
Really kind
whose
of you.
book, The Many Lives of Saida X, I have read and admired, and also agonized over, the kind of travails that migrant workers in India need to go through. So it's my privilege to be in conversation with you.
Thank you for that. I remember speaking to you because we're talking about social thrillers. I remember once you mentioned that, how writing started for you, where when in London you were trying to look for thrillers written by Indian writers and you couldn't find any. And then you created a category called social thrillers. You said that you couldn't find Indian writers writing thrillers, and then you started writing in this format, which you call social thrillers. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
So this all started in around, 2003, when this was the fag end of my posting in London, and I had an idea for a novel, but then my training as a diplomat kicked in. Because remember, in 2003, the publishing world was very different from what it is today. Today, the middleman has been cut out of the publishing industry. You don't need to go through an agent, you don't need to go through a publisher, you can go straight to Amazon and publish your book if you're not finding a proper publisher, for instance. But in 2003, the publishing world was very much the middleman world, where you had to go through the gatekeepers. You had to find an agent, you had to find a publisher, and only then you could be published. So when I decided that I wanted to write something, I said that I must first check out the competition. Because growing up, I read a staple diet of basically mysteries and thrillers. The same ones that many of us have read: Agatha Christie, Earl Stanley Gardner, Arthur Conan Doyle, Alistair MacLean, Desmond Bagley, people like that. So because I was fascinated by that genre, I wanted to write in that same genre. So I said, my first novel has to be a thriller. But then I said, let me first find out what kind of thrillers Indian writers write, because till then all my reading was about Western writers writing thrillers. So I was posted in London at that time. I went to the local library and I told the librarian, I said, please give me the 10 best thriller books by Indian writers. And she looked at me very blankly and said, thriller books by Indian writers? I said, yes. She says, I can't think of a single thriller book by an Indian. I said, come on, you have 100,000 books in your library there, and you're saying, yeah, no books. She says, yeah, I have many books by very good Indian writers, but I do not think I have a single thriller book written by an Indian writer. So I said, okay, then what do Indian writers write? Because till then, you see, I had not really read too much of Indian writing in English, barring maybe Khushwant Singh. I had read his Train to Pakistan, but I had not really read a lot of the other Indian writers writing in English. So that is when it was my first exposure to Salman Rushdie and Arundhati Roy and Vikram Seth and Marin Suri and Pankaj Mishra and all these people. Because till then I had not read Indian writers writing in English. And when I read, and I bought about 26 books, because you could borrow 26 books at a time from that library. And I read all 26 books and I discovered two things. One, not a single one of them was a thriller. And two, they were all about society. Either a generational family saga from 1870 to 1972, or like Rohinton Mystery Rights or whatever, but not a single one of them was a thriller. They were all about society and social issues. So that's when I had to revise my initial enthusiasm that, okay, I'm going to write a thriller, but then if Indian writers are not good at writing thrillers, then most likely the book that I'm writing is not going to do well. And especially I didn't want to waste 3 years of my life writing something which does not get published. So I said, how can I marry my fascination with thrillers with the kind of books Indian writers write? So that's why I said, okay, I will write about society, but I will write about society in a thrilling kind of way. And that's why I think I invented my own genre called social thrillers.
So many of you, I don't know if you're familiar, that Vikas grew up in a family of lawyers. And if anyone follows the writing that he has done, you'll see that there are a lot of influences because you grew up in such an environment. Tell us more about it.
Yes, so in terms of the influence, I would say, lawyers' briefs are supposed to be very well composed, with a proper beginning, middle and end and kind of a thing. And in my writing also, if you see, the structure is very important. So that, I suppose, maybe comes from the DNA. My father was a lawyer, my mother was a lawyer, my grandfather was the Solicitor General of India, my uncle was a lawyer, my aunt was a lawyer, my grandfather's brother was the Chief Justice of the Lucknow bench of the Allahabad High Court. So everyone in my family was in the legal profession. I was the first person who diverged from that profession because my mother said, if any of my children joins the legal profession, I'll kick him out of the house. Because she was just completely fed up with all the legalese that was going on. But growing up in that environment, first of all, the legal world is a literary world. In the sense, you're constantly reading and analyzing and extrapolating from that, quoting case precedents, etc. So from that point of view, my grandfather had a magnificent 10,000 book library in his own house. And because he was an eclectic reader, so that's why apart from legal tomes, he also had Albert Camus and Franz Kafka and Khushwant Singh. And that's how my love for reading really started. So I would say definitely my early exposure to reading was mediated by the fact that I had a 10,000 book library in my house. And that's why in my first book I have thanked my grandfather.
But do you remember any case that really
Oh yes, my grandfather was a very famous lawyer from Allahabad, and he was responsible for some very, very seminal cases. One case I remember he did was on the abolition of the privy purse, for instance. Whether, these princes had a right to continue enjoying their privy purses, or Indira Gandhi's decision to, feudalism is over, the princely states are over, we don't need to keep them, giving them a pension for life. So that was one case. Another case he did was a very interesting one, where a judge had tendered his resignation, but then withdrew his resignation. And the question was, once you have tendered your resignation, can you withdraw your resignation or not? And I remember, because I was very close to my grandfather was looking up the Mahabharata, and Yudhishthir and whatnot, all kinds of things were quoted in that particular judgment, that does an individual have the right to withdraw the resignation before it has been accepted, or he loses the right once he has already put in his paper, so to speak. So these were some of the, and then of course my grandfather was very active when emergency happened. I remember there was a meeting in my house where L.K. Advani and Raj Narayan had come to discuss how we should proceed, because democracy is being throttled in India, how we can restore democracy. So my grandfather was a part of all those very, very important movements. He actually addressed some public meetings also against the emergency in Allahabad.
So, like in your life, as personally and also professionally, you've seen the corridors of power in many, many ways, and you've sort of navigated them, understood them in various ways. But in your writing, for example, some of the protagonists that you write about, for example, in Q&A, your protagonist is a waiter trying to make ends meet. In Six Suspects, again, you write about a person who has killed someone who is a working class person. Similarly, in your recent book, again, you speak about a woman who has to recount to the person who's held her hostage what her condition is. And so there are many things here at play. You choose people who have nothing to do with the power corridors. Right. And why do you choose them? So where is it coming from?
No, it's coming from the fact that, look, when I did my book reading, when I did my launch in Delhi, the Norwegian ambassador was sitting there. So I posed a question to her. I said, ma'am, in Norway, you don't have people living in the slums. The average per capita income is maybe $40,000 or something like that. Everybody is reasonably well off. So the kind of stories you have in Norway are probably stories of love, marriage and divorce. Should I marry, Greta, or should I marry Garbo, or, those kinds of issues are confronting you. But in India, you have people living at what I call the ground zero of human survival. And their stories are much more compelling. Should I marry Greta or should I marry Garbo is more interesting than will I live tomorrow or will I die tomorrow? I have 5 rupees in my pocket, will I get a meal tomorrow or will I starve to death tomorrow? Which is more interesting? Obviously, I think the stakes are much higher in the stories of these people from ground zero of human survival. So I'm not very naturally attracted to those kinds of people and those kinds of stories, not just for the element of drama that is possible, but also, the stakes are so much higher in those kinds of stories where, the existential struggle that these people are going through. Yeah. I mean, to give a voice to the voiceless, let's put it. I mean, I don't want to put myself in that role and say, I'm trying to do that, but in a way, that's my attempt. Because the guy who's living underneath the overbridge, with 1 rupee in his pocket, he will never be able to write his story. He cannot. Even if he has the vocabulary, he does not have the means to convert that vocabulary into this thing. So, to me, it gives me a satisfaction that, these unwritten stories that we see all around us, if somehow I can give voice to those, what's wrong in that?
So, like in your recent book, The Girl with Seven Lives, where Devi is the protagonist, and Devi is basically held hostage by a person who accuses her of several crimes, and then asks her to recount all that has happened in her life to be able to get a chance to get a release from there.
Not a release.
Yeah.
He is going to, he's putting her up live for an online auction.
Yeah, online.
So the highest bidder is going, I mean, he says, I am going to hand you over to whoever is the highest bidder.
Yeah. So in the book, you are looking at various geographical locations in India, the diversity of the country. Tell us more about what all you have looked at in this book.
Yes. So you see, again, this is from my training as a diplomat, because as a diplomat, you're constantly interpreting India for your foreign audience. I mean, that's the main task of a diplomat, that you have to explain India to the place where you are posted to, what is India all about, what makes India tick, why you should invest in India, why you should love India. I mean, these are the kind of things we are always constantly explaining. And India is the most difficult country to explain to anyone, for the simple reason, it's the most complex country on the planet. No other country has that bewildering array of diversity that we have in India. 22 official languages. Which country in the world has 22 official languages? And then the various stratifications we have. Most countries have a single stratification of race, but we have the caste system, and that creates its own dynamic, the amount of stratifications that you have in society stemming from the caste system. And then you have the geographical diversity. The north of India is very, very different from the south of India, and as we are seeing in the current debate that's going on delimitation and things like that. So what I try to do in my novels is to try to render some of the complexity of India slightly more accessible. So to give an example, if I were to write a story based on, let's say, guests living in the Mayfair Lagoon Hotel, it would try to scratch at maybe 0.00001% of the Indian reality, because these would be very upper middle class or upper class people who are living in the Mayfair Lagoon, who are visiting Odisha, for a few days and, maybe going to Konark or concluding their mining deal or whatever it is. It will be that world. But by creating a polyphonic narrative, by creating a multidimensional narrative where my protagonist is constantly moving from place to place and interacting with different strata of society, I try to capture slightly more of the elusive Indian reality than you would get from a single narrative. So that's why I have not set a single story of mine in just one building or whatever, because that does not appeal to me. And that's what I have tried to do in The Girl with the Seven Lives, where Devi, not only does she get into a new avatar every 3 years almost. From Devi she becomes Deepa, from Deepa she becomes Diba, a Muslim, from Diba she becomes Dasmeet, a Punjabi, from Dasmeet she becomes Deepthi, a Keralite, from Deepthi she becomes Diana, a Christian nurse, and from Diana finally she becomes Dolly. And Dolly is thus one of those, fit into anything kind of a thing. It's one of those names where you cannot really know what Dolly is all about. So this is her reinvention, and then the fact that she moves from Delhi to Punjab to Kerala to Goa to Mumbai. Again, I'm trying to capture some of the geographical diversity of India, and then the power structures, the hierarchy in each of these places that she's interacting with.
But there's also something very important in your writing, where there are people who are struggling with trying to get some kind of social mobility, or dealing with the corruption in the society, but also dealing with the very systemic socio-economic marginalization. Why do you, even when you're talking about all these big things, I know that you steer towards it. So it is not something that you have just sat and decided. As a writer, there are all your experiences from life are definitely making you steer in a particular way, because that is your worldview. And that worldview could have been shaped because you were in North America, you were also in Africa, you were also in India. So how was this worldview shaped? So that, in spite of whatever privileges you have, you keep coming and talking about people who are on the margins.
Yes.
How was this shaped?
No, so again, maybe harking back to the first question you asked, that how the fact that I was in a legal family shaped my worldview. And I think the thing about, being in a lawyer's family is, lawyers are always seeking justice. So I think it's this quest for justice which you might, in a sense, this is the first time I've answered this question in this way, because you are the first person who has actually linked this to the legal background of my family. But maybe in a subconscious way, it's that elusive quest for justice that drives my characters, all of them. And because they are also constantly searching for either a personal justice or a more, political, I mean, none of the books are overtly political, but maybe a social justice kind of a thing. For instance, in the latest novel, there is just a throwaway line that she belonged to the untouchable community. But she does not believe in that, and that's why she never talks about it, even though, because the novel is in the first person. She does not even refer to it afterwards, because she does not subscribe to that. How can just an accident of birth consign me to a particular social hierarchy in which I had no role to play at all? She does not believe in that. She rejects that, in fact, and that's why she says, I will build my own destiny. I will create my own life, even though, I have to go through a lot of travails and tribulations, but I will create my own life on my own terms. And I think that's the leitmotif of that whole novel, resilience and reinvention.
And it's interesting that you write about it in today's times, because there have been all these reports about India where, we are at a time where, inequality is as high as it was at the colonial times. There is a lot of income gap between various sections of the society. There's always a struggle to be able to access whatever. But one thing, and another thing, and I want you to respond to this, but also asking this bit about how memory plays such an important role in all your books. Because in Q&A, for example, this person who's sitting and recounting their experiences, or here Devi is held hostage and again she has to recount her experiences. And memory for a lot of us is very selective, right? We want to remember certain things and we don't want to mention, and particularly when it comes to personal narratives, it's only certain things that I want to talk about is what I want to talk about. So why do you keep going back to memory?
Yeah, memory is very important. In the very first book, there is this throwaway line. A quiz test is not so much a test of knowledge as a test of memory. It's really a test of memory. How much do you remember? Whether, when you sit in the hot seat and you are asked a question, how are you able to answer that question? Because you had read it, but you have forgotten it, then, the memory has failed you. But if you remember what you had read maybe 10 years ago, then you have a good memory. So memory is important, and especially because, you see, some of my novels follow a very non-linear narrative also. Q&A, for instance, was completely non-linear. You're jumping from here to there, and that's where memory comes in. Because memory can also be very non-linear. Yes. Suddenly out of the blue, you may recall something which you had not thought about for the last 20 years. And then the next thing may have no connection to that particular thing. And also because the narrative structure in some of my novels lends itself to the memory aspect. Because in The Accidental Apprentice also, she is now, this girl, 23-year-old Sapna Sinha, has been arrested on charge of murder. She's sitting in a police station, and she is recalling what brought her to this point, how it all began, why did she finally land up in a police station and facing charges of murder. So the whole thing is a flashback in her memory. And similarly in The Girl with the Seven Lives, the kidnapper is putting a gun to the head of Devi and saying, now I'm accusing you of all these crimes, confess to each and every one of those crimes. So that the people that you have wronged when you committed that crime, they can bid on your life because they need proof that yes, you indeed are the person who committed that crime. So again, she has to delve back into her memory bank. And the interesting thing about, because then you also get into this whole unreliable narrator stuff. That at the end of the day, is the narrator, especially when you're writing in the first person narrative, is the narrator being truthful or the narrator not being truthful? I have not really played around that much with that, but that is also something that intrigues me, this whole unreliable narrator thing, which Agatha Christie did it in The Murder of Roger Stiles, with the first book, where the narrator turns out to be the murderer. And that's the hardest trick to pull off, so to speak, because it really throws off the reader. The last thing the reader expects is that the person who's narrating this whole story about justice is the murderer himself.
So, I also want to ask you something, which is, of course, a lot of us who are writing and are in this space, of course, a lot of gratitude, but also a slight bit of accusation, okay?
Oh my God.
Which is that you wrote your fantastic book Q&A and it became a blockbuster. And now all writers are expected to write books which become blockbuster movies. That's a lot of pressure, and you are responsible for it in a little. And these are times when OTT is coming, a lot of publishing places, or just generally the conversation is write books that can be converted into a film or a web series. So what do you think, because in this universe, because when you did it, it was fantastic. But now for everyone, that is the expectation. So the merit of the book or what is being written inside the book has less of an importance in this universe that we are speaking about. Where do you see in this situation the future of publishing or books and their existence in themselves?
Yeah. So I was there at the Shashi Tharoor session, and he was also lamenting the fact that people's attention spans are shrinking. They are not engaging with the world of, high literature as they are with Instagram and things like that. People are reading more WhatsApp forwards than are reading novels, and he lamented that fact. And it's a fact. I think this is something we have to accept, that yes, book reading is no longer the cherished pastime that it used to be when I was growing up, because at that time we didn't have PlayStation, we didn't have Netflix, we didn't have internet. So you only could watch movies or you could read books. There was nothing else. And that's why, books were so much in demand. In fact, I remember a lending library which used to charge 25 paisa per day for a book. And I used to read the book and return it the same day itself to save money. But these days, because books are, you see, one thing is books, what I call the commodification of books. A book is now a commodity. It is no longer जो हम लोग कहते थे विद्या, कि ज़मीन पे गिर जाती थी, then immediately you put it to your forehead and you say, अरे विद्या को ज़मीन पे छूने नहीं देना चाहिए हमें. It's no longer that. A book, they say a book's price $7.99, Reebok's sneakers $8.99. Should I spend it on the book or should I spend it on the sneaker? So that is the first thing. The books have lost their exalted space in our personal imagination and in our economic world also, as used to be in the past. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, as you rightly said, the rise of OTT, the rise of, the image is drowning out the word. Like the joke is, the father is telling the kid, okay, you don't want to read, very heavy duty books, you don't want to read Neha Dixit, all right, at least read Harry Potter. And the kid says, Dad, I'll wait for the movie to come out. Because that will tell me the whole story. Why the hell do I need to spend 5 days reading the book? So that is what is happening, that the image is drowning out the word, and more, people are looking at how the story can be monetized for the screen. But look, I think that's the wrong way of looking at it. Because many people ask me that when you are writing this, since all 3 of my previous books have gone into, 2 have been made, third one will be made, the contract is already signed. So they ask me that when you are writing this, are you having one eye at the possibility that tomorrow it will be a web series or a film? And I said no, because the moment you do that, your book will be compromised. Because now you are not thinking of it as qua book, you are thinking as a book which might tomorrow be a web series, and you will put in elements deliberately which make it more cinematic and things like that, and the end result will be, it will not be a good book. And if it is if it is not a good book, it will not be a good web series also. So then I think you destroy the whole fundamental. But the second thing is, you need actually more books now, because if you look at Bollywood is crashing left, right and center. 95% of even big budget movies are crashing because they are not based on good content. Yeah. They don't have good stories. And unless they have good stories, audiences is not going to come, because in the past, audience had no option. If it's a movie by Govinda or Amitabh Bachchan, then that itself was the draw. Yeah. But nowadays, you have the remote in your hand. And you say, okay, I'm not liking this, let's see something else. So my sense is, we actually need better stories. Stories which are grounded in, the universe of the story, not the universe of the OTT platform. Because then only, if they find that this is a story which resonates with the audience, which has emotion, which has drama, whatever, then they will think of it as a good web series. But if the story itself is weak, then it will be a weak web series as well. So I think writers who are thinking of doing this are making a mistake.
Yeah.
If you really want to write for the cinematic medium, then write a screenplay. Don't write a story.
You just spoke about Vidya and the power of knowledge, but you've also a lot of times spoken about, and you've said, the crass commercialization of knowledge, and particularly in the context of Q&A and the Kaun Banega Crorepati style. And this is also the time when AI is coming. Yep. We have ChatGPT. People are not even writing their own emails, forget writing stories.
Exactly.
So that is happening. So where in this space, with knowledge and writers and coming with fresh ideas, having a curiosity, having a critical consciousness, and then having AI, what is the scope of having any kind of authenticity in the writings that exist right now?
I think this is going to be the biggest challenge for us, because AI has cracked the operating system of humanity. and our operating system is language. Once you have cracked language, then anything which is language based becomes fair game. Anything which is based on language, stories, short plays, stories, novels, plays, anything. I mean, we speak, I mean, that's how we communicate with each other. So anything that has to do with language, if AI has cracked that, then AI can do that. Now the criticism that what criticism the silver lining people say is, AI is there, it can draft emails, etc. But AI cannot think. AI does not have emotions. So AI will not be able to write that world-beating screenplay or that world-beating novel which wins a Pulitzer Prize, because it cannot think, it cannot emote, it cannot understand emotions. But I say that does not matter to the AI. AI knows, for instance, and I give an example, Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking is supposed to be one of the world's best meditations on grief, right? Because she wrote when her husband died, and it was really, how she coped with the aftermath of her husband's death, etc. It's supposed to be one of the world's best meditation on grief. ChatGPT has not died. Nobody in ChatGPT's family has died. ChatGPT does not know what death is. But ChatGPT knows that Joan Didion's book, The Year of Magical Thinking, is the best meditation on grief. Similarly, it will find out which are the 10 other books written by Gabriel Garcia Marquez or whatever, which are meditations on grief. And it will scrape from there, and it will craft something which will be as good as anybody who has actually experienced death. And you will not be able to distinguish that whether AI has written this or Gabriel Garcia Marquez has written it. So that's the level to which eventually AI will reach. I mean, it's not there yet at all, of course, but maybe give it another 3 years, not even 5 years, because Sam Altman is saying artificial general intelligence is coming as early as late 2025. And AI, and the holy grail of AI is artificial general intelligence. Artificial general intelligence would mean AI that is capable of thinking like a human, doing as complex mathematical permutations, linguistic permutations as a human can do. And once you have that level of AI, then as I said, you just have to give the keywords. Okay, write a story in which the central element is grief, or write a story in which the central element is death, and and give it the various prompts, and it will scrape from here and there, and it will produce something equally brilliant, which could be produced by a person actually experiencing those emotions. So I think that's the thing about AI, that it's the scariest thing also. It's also the most wonderful thing ever. And I think if humans and AI can coexist, and work together as a tool for further improvement, it's good. But if AI takes over, as Elon Musk is always worried about, then I don't know what the future of the human race is going to be.
So I have my last question before we open up to the audience. You've been a diplomat, so I have to ask you this, which is, you spoke about Deepa, Diba, and Dolly.
Yes.
Your protagonist in Q&A was Ram Mohammed Thomas.
Ram Mohammed Thomas.
Okay, so there is essentially a lot of plurality that you keep hinting at, and now
because again that's part of the Indian reality.
So the times that we are living in, where there is a rise of there's censorship globally in the Indian subcontinent as well, and there is a lot of attack on diversity, plurality, trying to make everything homogeneous. Why do you, of course it's to your great credit that you keep bringing it up, but how do you assess it as a person who's seen the world and looked at, as a diplomat, how do you assess what is happening in geopolitics right now, and what is the kind of impact it will have on all of us sitting here?
I think it will have a major impact, especially the kind of gutting of institutions that we are seeing in America, where everything, the DEI, diversity, inclusion, and, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are being not just scrapped, they are officially being prohibited now. That not only will you not have these, not only will the existing programs scrap, you cannot create any new programs based on this thing. So I think it will have a very chilling impact, there's no doubt, because to completely wipe out Black History Month and say the blacks did not exist, slavery did not exist, I don't think that alternative history is going to take root. Eventually you cannot homogenize society completely. So, and the second thing that we are seeing is the rise of the outrage economy, the outrage society. That people are getting outraged very, very quickly and very, very easily on very, very minor things. And if that continues, then that will have a further chilling effect on people's right to create what they want to create. they may not feel comfortable enough that if as a minority I'm trying to project something which so-called belongs to the majority, then that might not be perceived in the right way. So I think, these are troubling times, but again, I think the way forward is literature. Because literature is the one which has always shown the way forward. And I think if literature can navigate this, I always say this, if more Israelis had read books by Palestinians and if more Palestinians had read books by Israelis, maybe what is happening in Gaza would not have been happening because there would have been greater accommodation of each other's points of view. But because now we are living in closed echo chambers, where we are only hearing the points of view that correspond to ours, and we are not opening ourselves to diverse points of view, that is why we are in the situation that we are in.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions? Okay. Yes. We'll get the mic to you, and we'll focus on the questions. Comments can come later.
Okay. But I would like to thank both of you. It was a delightful session, wonderful afternoon. So I have a question on craft, on your writing craft. So because you say that you're a diplomat and you come from a family of lawyers, actually I am a corporate lawyer. Okay. And my mom pushed me into law. My mom is here. Okay. So she's pushed me into law, though fiction is my life. Because...
So you're a corporate lawyer and a writer?
Yes.
Okay.
A writer. And... because 90% of my job is in the corporate sector, and you must know that the kind of drafting that we do, so that language runs in my head day in and day out. So my question to you is that because you are a senior government officer and you are a writer and an acclaimed writer, so is there any way in which you disassociate the language, or have you found a way to marry the two?
Well, luckily, in diplomacy, you don't have to have that contradiction for the simple reason. As an accountant, you work in a very limited construct, numbers and figures and things like that. But, the main trade craft of a diplomat is words. That is what we are taught. Unlike an IAS or an IPS, where, a lot of legwork is involved, a lot of meeting people, this, that is involved. Our main trade craft is words. We know the value of words, and we know how to use words very carefully, because one wrong nuance can send relationship with a foreign country into a tailspin. So because of the fluency that you have in dealing with words, when you are converting that fluency into fiction or non-fiction, I suppose that comes in handy actually. It's not a constraint, it's an advantage. That because you know the value of words, you can frame those words for your fiction or your non-fiction. So from that point of view, the difference comes in, diplomacy works in a very different way. As Mr. Shashi Tharoor was also explaining, I was doing a panel with the Turkish ambassador the other day. The Turkish ambassador is also an acclaimed novelist. So he asked me, he says, Vikas San, tell me, as a diplomat, what is the most offensive language that you can use? What is the biggest abuse you can use as a diplomat? And I said, the maximum I can say is, I condemn. That's the maximum I can use. You cannot use anything beyond condemn. Condemn is the highest form of diplomatese for something which you totally dislike, but you say, I condemn. As Mr. Tharoor was also explaining, that when you say the two had very frank and candid conversation, it means they were yelling at each other and they were completely disagreeing with each other, but in diplomatese, you say they had a frank exchange of views, That's the way. So that is the difference, that in diplomacy, even though you know the words, but you use the words in a very limited way. Because you cannot show extreme emotion. Diplomacy is all about moderation, is all about balance. But as a writer, you cannot pull your punches. You cannot say, oh, the slum was a middle class colony. You cannot say that. You have to call it as it is. It is the hellhole. It is a absolute pits. It's a place where mosquitoes and sewer rats are there. You cannot pull your eyes away from that. You have to call it as you see it. So that's the difference. That as a diplomat, many things are left unsaid. You speak in between the lines. But as a writer, you need not speak between the lines. You have to actually say it with as many words as you command, as you can muster.
So what you can't do it as a official, you could do as a writer?
Yes, so sometimes that is an outlet also. But as I said, there is not that much of cognitive dissonance in diplomacy. It was not as if that, the government is doing something which I hate and I'm going to express myself in my writing and things like that. Because the world of diplomacy, luckily India's diplomatic record is such that, all the governments, there has been a broad continuity. And I think we are doing fantastically well in terms of the prestige that India today acquires has acquired on the global stage, etc. So that is not the thing, but yes, I think for me, writing was a way to manifest my creative impulses. Because beyond the point, diplomacy, you cannot be too creative. You should not be too creative. The best diplomat is one who is never in the print. That is the best diplomat, who is never ever seen, never heard outside, of his immediate circle. As an official spokesman, what was my main task? I should not become the news. I should convey the news. I should create the news, but I should not become the news. That is the thing. But as a writer, it's totally different. You have to be out there promoting your work, attending literary festivals like the KLF. You have to be here all the time. So that is where I think the discrepancy comes in between the diplomat's life and a writer's life. But as I said, the idea was, when I was a diplomat, I'm no longer a diplomat, I kept the two worlds very segmented. It was very, very clear that when I'm a diplomat, and that's why this novel, which Neha has talked about, took 11 years. Because for me, the job came first. It was not that, regardless of what happens, I'm going to write that novel. No, I said, no, if I do not find the time and the space because of the constraints of my job, then I will not create. I will only create when I actually have the time and the space. And that's why 11-year gap took place between the Accidental Apprentice and this one.
Thank you very much. Actually, out of 2 questions, I got answer already.
Okay.
Through these 5 minutes, I got
Excellent.
answer. One question not answered. I am a student of diplomacy from JNU,
Okay.
SIS.
Right.
My profession is different. So I agree with you. Even my upbringing is different.
Okay.
Nothing to do with law, or my
Mic
father
is not-
teacher, or whatever may be.
Right.
Very correctly you told that diplomacy has nothing to do with creativity. But one question, that Sri Ravi Shankar, we had interaction with this, on AI. AI, with the buzzword, people misuse the word AI, wrongly use the word AI to impress, no? In all type of profession, AI is introduced. Sri Ravi Shankar told, this question asked exactly this in a different way, that what is AI, your emotion and all the thought process. What I understand, and interacting with the top people in AI in USA universities when I visit every year there, they told that AI, I am a layman, no, in AI.
Right.
But AI is what is in cloud data or whatever may be the thing, from there that AI will work, or the programming, coding, everything will work. Not what is not there, it can't work.
Can you
So
please
your emotion
ask the
is
question,
that
please?
your creativity is that very correctly told. So madam's question was in the course of discussion, AI is coming in a big way, the novels will there, thought process will there. So what is your final, impression? Can AI influence the creativity of a man?
But AI, but see, that's what I'm saying. You see, it is one thing when you do a Google search. Google pulls from the, from the cloud, whatever data is available, and it gives you all those rankings, correct? That is how the Google search works. That when I Google your name, whatever is there, it will scrape and it will show me the rankings. This is what all I have got on this person. That is the available data to it. What AI is different. AI basically looks at all the data and then creates a new data based on those data points that are available to it. And that's why AI is also doing what we call hallucination. In fact, today only I have read that someone in, I think, Sweden has sued AI because he said, tell me all the things you know about me. He put his name in. And he says, this is a gentleman who was born in Sweden, and he was in the news because he killed his 2 sons. And of course, his sons are alive. So he has sued AI now, he has sued ChatGPT that, how can you, if anybody Googles my name, this is what he's going to show. So that is called hallucination, where AI is actually creating stuff from thin air. And example I give is of Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park film, if you have seen. What did they do? They tried to replicate the DNA of a dinosaur. From the amber, a mosquito bit a dinosaur, the dinosaur blood came into the mosquito got trapped in amber, from amber they took out the mosquito, they extracted that blood, and they said, okay, we are finding the DNA of the dinosaur. DNA was not complete, they added the DNA of a frog to complete that DNA. So this is what AI also does. That, whatever it can get, it gets, but where it finds a gap, it it invents stuff, it conjures up stuff out of thin air. And that is why the latest generation of AI they are working on is how to reduce this hallucination. That is the current problem in AI.
Yeah, one last question.
The last question,
Yes,
she said.
this is my former colleague, Mr. Kuladhar Saikia, former DGP of Assam,
No, it's
but a
okay, thank
Sahitya
you.
Academy Award winner.
Just only one point. You see, you've been talking about AI and all chat GPT and other things. But what do you think, all over the world now, there's a bit of a danger now because, you see, when internet was invented, the people thought it would be the most democratic platform. It will be open to each and everyone, right? Now, over time, it has been seen that only 4 or 5 languages are going to dominate the digital space, right? So what it means is, that means the smaller languages are getting extinguished all over the world because of they are not getting any space in the digital space, right? There's a wide protest all over, even in Eastern European countries like, Lithuania, Estonia and others. They are in the fear that their language will be lost from digital space, all right? So when you're talking about AI, the most important thing is how much resources you have in the digital space. AI is going to scrap through that only because recently, I think US AI laboratory in a university, they're giving the prompts to AI to write a poetry on Vietnamese language. And the AI wrote the poem, but it missed out a very important word from Vietnamese language. You know why? Because there is no resource from that language. Right. So don't you think this is a very big problem for us, because all the smaller languages all over the world, including Indian languages, are going to face a sort of a extinction in digital space if we do not make it
I think that's a very valuable point you are making. I'll say 2 things. One, when the internet started, we started talking about the digital divide. The digital divide that exists in the sense that those who have internet access and those who do not have internet access. And that to a certain extent, because as the cost of data has come down, as the cost of bandwidth has come down, I think we are seeing a more democratization of the internet space. But with AI, we will have a second level of digital divide, which will be the AI divide. Those who can afford the $200 per month ChatGPT subscription, and those who will carry the free ChatGPT subscription, and which the ChatGPT free one will max out after 5 queries, and the $200 one will, which means obviously those who have the access to the $200 one will be much more productive because they will have those many more resources to them. But on the second part of your question, there I have a contra view. I think AI will be the savior of the smaller languages, because for the first time, you see, if you look at the difference in translation of Google Translate and ChatGPT Translate, just try it. It's a world of difference. Why? Because ChatGPT has cracked grammar and language. Google Translate has not cracked grammar and language, and that's why if you just do put something in English and say, isko Hindi mein translate kar do, Odia mein translate kar do, Google Translate will give you lots of grammatical syntax errors because it has not cracked language. But AI has cracked language. If you put the same thing and say, isko Odia mein translate kar do, I am pretty sure that you will get 95% accuracy with full correct grammar, etc. So in a sense, because AI it's just a question of coding. In Vietnamese, they missed out that one thing, but now the coders will put that thing in. So if you develop better AI systems with these smaller languages, actually that will be the savior, because my biggest grouse against, in India is we have no culture of translation. We keep saying, all the bhashas are important and we must give importance to them, etc. But the fact of the matter is, we have the worst quality of translators available in our country. Karan Singh was telling me, he says, ye bhal ho gaya hai ki, sab kuch mangal hai ka, the translation was everything is Tuesday. I mean, this is the level at which we are operating. And that's why I think ChatGPT, AI is going to be a savior for many of these smaller languages, because it just takes one dedicated AI researcher to feed that, to input that in. And then the output would be, as I said, in perfect syntax and grammar. And maybe that is a way of keeping these languages alive, and more importantly, getting translations done. I am amazed that even your book, which won the Sahitya Academy Award, I cannot read you wrote in Assamese, I cannot read it in English. Because I cannot even read it in Hindi, because it's not been translated. So that is where I think, AI could be a panacea for these smaller languages, and it could provide the translation tools, which, humans at the moment in our country are not able to do it. In places like, in Italy, in Portugal, in Croatia, they read more authors in translation than they read their own authors. Because there's a very robust culture of translation. But in our country, unfortunately, that culture is starting, but I think it's still in its infancy.
Thank you everyone for being here. And this is Vikas, who's from diplomat, using very less words to a writer who's talking about every possible thing and translations and possibilities. After this, because we're really running late. But thank you all for being here, and thank you for, and to many more
Neha.
blockbusters and bestsellers, and all of us maybe accuse you even more.
Thank you so much. This was as I said, absolutely wonderful conversation, and we covered some facets which I have not covered in other conversations. So all thanks to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Is my classmate. You can come from the front, sir. It will have a better picture, sir. You was in the IPS.